so much. Lovely seeing the panelists here today. And good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first panel of the day. The conversation today would not be just boring you with dashboards and logs, but moving beyond to that, to kind of look at how observability data drives business outcomes. Before we get started, I just want to kind of have a quick show of hand. How many of you logged today to look at your dashboard before you even had your first coffee? I think so. Such is the life living the DevOps world, right? So people go through their Instagram, some people swipe on Tinder, but DevOps live in dashboards, right? So, and observability obviously has come a long way, I think, from just being a monitoring platform to a core pillar of engineering. And that's where I think the conversation today is looking at how we can leverage all the data to drive insights, take actions out of it, and drive business outcomes, right? And from the amazing panel today, from startups to publishing house to healthcare pharma to driving business, financial business systems today, I think one thing that I see that's common in the panel is it's not just about the technology. I think that's what we were discussing backstage. It's not just about what technology that you're using, but how are you leveraging that technology to drive business outcome? How do you kind of now take that data and go into boardroom to say what is that we need to do and how we can kind of improve the customer experience, how to kind of deliver on the promises that we have made. And with that, I'll probably get started with our first question to the panelists. Right? Bhuvanesh, if I can get started with you. Right? So, in your role as a CTO, right? So at Klenty, how do you move from pretty dashboards? Right? Everybody can come up with pretty fancy-looking dashboards, but from that, how do you kind of leverage that data, what you're seeing, to drive real actions, right? And has there been any incidents where your gut said, based on the experience, based on working with the team, your gut said something else, but the dashboard was showing something else? Would love to kind of look at your experience there.
Okay, so Klenty is a SaaS platform. Just a quick overview. It's a sales engagement platform, and so anybody can build visualizations, right? But what actionable insights are you getting from that dashboard? That's pretty much important. And it's also an age of AI, right? So if you are, say for example, if you want to make an actionable insight out of it, you might as well think of it as a data point that is going into an agent right now, right? If it is not going to go into an agent and convert as a action that you want to perform, you probably are looking at the wrong dashboard. So every data point that gets distilled out of all the logs that get generated has to be actionable, and that's what goes as a dashboard, is what I would suggest. And everybody deals with slow queries or, I don't know, your long-running processes that ought not to run that much and so on, right? So if it is not going into an agent, you might as well not look at it at all, right? So any action that has to happen only has to be distilled as a dashboard and so on.
Absolutely makes sense, right? So I think it all has to be actionable, right? And from that, Mansoor, I'll move to you, right? So we probably, CaratLane started as largely an online organization before moving to like an omni-channel online and e-commerce, retail. Your customers are actually probably shopping 24/7, right? So now in that case, obviously you cannot have a downtime, essentially, right? So what would be your secret sauce from like using observability as a passive monitoring system to real-time actionable system, right? So.
Okay, thanks. So not only in CaratLane, for any e-commerce, uptime is not just a KPI, it is the heartbeat of the business. So for us, moved from passive dashboards to a proactive action is we moved focus from what went wrong to why it happened, that trend way. So for that, we implemented end-to-end observability. It's something like collated all our logs, metrics, traces, and user experience, everything to a single correlation and automation. So I think that's a secret of sauce for the CaratLane to achieve the uptime all the time. And it is something like um, um, correlation plus automated insights. So that is what should be in place all the time to get it. And so instead of, creating thousands of noisy alerts, so we should go with structured level objects and service level objects plus data from the defined, error budgets. So, so in this case, when trigger an alert is something should be a real customer risk, not just simply a CPU spikes. And also, we were using some inbuilt AIOps, AIOps-based detection methodology, which will find the issue on the fly before incident causing anything in the site. So ultimately, the proactive dashboard from the observability stack should be giving actionable data fast enough to the engineers so that they will find the RCA at quicker time. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that. I think it's really helpful to understand the perspective, right? So obviously, how do you kind of give the right data back to the engineers to work upon, right, and cut down the noise that they're going through, right? Santosh, moving on to you, right? So from IDP perspective, right, so you have probably seen a lot of changes over the years, right? So I think about a 60-year-old organization, you've seen how the students engaged with your platform or with your organization today, right? So what kind of changes has observability brought in the way that your systems operate today, right, and kind of drive business decisions?
Three shifts that I've actually seen with the observability. First one is for the teams to be able to actually get the proactive nature instead of the reactive. So we used to have the alerts coming into our service desk reported by our customers directly. Now we're able to actually detect at least 60 to 70% of those alerts via the observability platform, and then those alerts are going into our service desk directly in an automated way, which actually helps our teams to actually notify immediately, right? That's the first shift. And the second one is the accountability and the ownership, right? If we have a right dashboard for the right squad, right, representing in a right way, they know that's my problem. I'll have to really solve it, right? In the distributed world now, where we are living, all the microservices, there's quite a lot of noise, and where the problem is, we don't know. I think that shift it's actually brought by the observability platform, right? That has actually helped us to get to that. The third one, which is really critical piece, is we are now able to understand the pattern and the usage of our platform and how students, our counselors, our partners, universities are using our platform, and then identify the features which are not useful, and then we can actually drop them, right? Because if they're not useful, there is no point in actually keeping them in the service at all. These are the three fundamental shifts that I have seen in our digital transformation through the observability. Had we not got the observability, we wouldn't have achieved these things.
And that's amazing to hear, like how typically like in education sector and students and how you're kind of leveraging observability to understand what's working and what's not working, right, in your applications, right? So from that, it'll probably move to very, very different industry. After I work, coming to you, you work in a very regulated healthcare industry, right? And AI has been the buzzword. Everybody we talks about AI and agents, right? How do you see like AI and observability? What kind of changes that it can bring in, right? And kind of give you the right insights and information for you to action upon?
Okay, interesting question. Since healthcare is being highly regulated industry, I would say 2 points. Before 10 years, we are all using observability tools only as a reactive measure. If something is not working, we go in and check with the logs and then take remedial actions. Now we are using it for proactive measures. With the help of AI, we are going to use it for preventing the failure. And that's the trend we are moving towards. Point number one. Second point, previously we used to monitor predominantly all servers. Monitoring means by default we will remember the word called server. Now apart from server, we have started monitoring all the applications. So application means not only login, logout pages, we have around 7 levels of monitoring happening within the application. So immediately after logging in, what happens next? User will be clicking on a particular action, or after that, third action. Likewise, 7 levels of monitoring is happening at the most, I would say, if you have the regulated applications. And then we started monitoring all the APIs also nowadays. Since in the age of agentic era, the application is not only for human users, it's for agents also. It means agents will be working predominantly with APIs. We started monitoring APIs also with serverless monitoring. Okay, these two are key changes happening across all the industry, that too highly regulated industry in the event of AI. Thank you for the question, Ankit.
That's amazing to know, right? So I think no industry today is sort of untouched with AI, right? And then every sort of tech stack is now getting reshaped and reformed the way that we have traditionally looked at it, right? And then that's where I think one thing that is obviously for all of you leaders, right, I think is how do you kind of make sure that the systems are up and running? And if something goes wrong, how do you kind of reduce the time to go back up, right? So the MTTR, MTD becomes very, very critical. So with that, Suresh, I'll probably come to you, right? So at Hindu, obviously like today, not at Hindu, but in general, I think there are hundreds of breaking news every single day in every news channel, right, that we keep seeing, right? So I think everything is a breaking news today, right? And so are the alerts and the observability platform, right? So now how are you using like your observability platform today to cut down, and you need to make sure that your systems are up and running, right? Similar to what we talked about with Mansoor is that people can access your e-newspapers, your website, all of that. It's not restricted to just getting your newspaper in the morning, right? So you can just access the news at any point of time. So how are you leveraging to kind of making sure your systems are up and running? And if anything goes wrong, how do you kind of bring down the MTTR?
Yeah. So basically, for us, there are two types of challenges. So one is, if I take, we moved from a traditional print organization to digital first organization in the last 15 years, right? During print days, you have a time of the day alerts. For example, if there's a system that is not working in the daytime in the morning, I can take 1 hour to solve it. But the same system, if it is going to go down at 7 o'clock in the evening, I have to fix it in a few minutes. Okay. That used to be the situation during print-only days. But now with the digital, it's 24/7. So observability becomes very important for us. If I look at digital observability, we can see it from two angles. One angle from infrastructure standpoint, another angle from editorial standpoint. From infrastructure standpoint, if you see, if my API response times are going down, which is in turn going to impact the page rendering for the end users, that means it is going to impact the engagement times with us. Or if the ad scripts are not loading properly, then it can actually impact the revenue there. Say, for example, the API that is handling the subscription payment fails. It's a revenue loss. So looking at these at the transaction level in real time and taking corrective action, say this payment gateway is not working, going forward, let us not route the payment request to this payment gateway and move them to the other gateway. Has to be done in real time. And that cannot happen unless you are observing and taking action on top of the observation. So that has to be inbuilt inside your application logic itself. So it's like observability working in tandem with the application logic to take corrective actions in real time. That's from an infrastructure standpoint. Same thing if I come from a content creation standpoint, right? So people have to, the editorial staff has to see, okay, this is the article that is performing very well. Lots of hits are coming to this article. So this article I need to move to a topper level so that it becomes more visible to the users. So that also is built back to the observation. That means our content publishing platform has to have intelligence from the observability platform to understand that this article is getting more page hits. So this has to be put on the top so that more people can see this. So all this has to work in unison. So today, the observability platform is as critical as our rest of the infrastructure for us today.
No, I think that's very interesting, right? So I don't think generally on a day-to-day basis when we are hitting those news websites, right, we realize that like how does the traffic kind of change the behavior in the background, right? And talking about the traffic, I think Shiva, coming to you, right? So you handle, I think, most amount of mutual fund transaction in the country today, right? Billions of transaction going through, and we talked about how we want to become more inclusive in terms of the outreach for mutual funds, right? By and then you move from a monolithic architecture to serverless architecture, right? So how sort of, what kind of frameworks you had to put in, or the changes and best practices that you have to put in to kind of make sure that you are able to take real-time actionable actions out of the data that you are getting, right? And then obviously transaction failure, we talked about the transaction failure cannot happen, right? So in your case, it becomes even more relevant and more important, right, with millions of people trying to do that. How are you leveraging the technology today to do that?
So we are literally in the process of moving money of our C company. So we have a very effective functioning monolithic platform in terms of taking transactions processing effectively, right? I think, but as we grow, I think as the volume of transaction grows, where we include inclusivity also into the platform, right? Where the ability for the customer to transact boundary, we are trying to lower the boundary of that particular entry point into the system. We are anticipating a large number of transactions to the system, right? So, and since we are also building the new microservices-based system into the cloud, I think the fundamental tenets that we are looking at is, right, rather than looking at observability as an failure, how do we track the business, can we track from a business point of view, right? So business outcomes is what we are tracking from our new observability platform perspective, right? I think there are two sub-goals we are moving towards. One is the time to detect an issue. Basically, we should be able to detect even before customer is able to identify the issue. And the second aspect is, how do we recover from that issue, right? How fast we can recover from the issue, because being in a financial market, right, that the window of operation is very limited during the course of the day. How do we effectively recover from the issues, right? So these are the two broad northern lights that we are traveling for, right? How to detect the issue much faster, and how to recover from the issue, right? From moving from a system where there are only very basic system of users logging in basically very basic information, right, about what is happening in the system, we are moving from that particular phase to more of an event correlation phase, because like we want to be empathetic to the internal users of the system. We have both the users, right? External users as well as internal users who are the SRE. We don't want to be throwing a bunch of alerts, right? Too much of noise into the system, so that the people who are debugging the system are with eyes on glass approach. They are not facing the burden of identifying signal from the noise, right? So that's why we are adopting an event correlation based approach, and we are also eventually adopting a causal inference based approach, where from an event correlation perspective, right, basically says what all moved together. If your CPU and latency moved together, right, it is up to the person who is sitting at an SRE to stitch the issues together to understand what is exactly causing an outage or what is causing an API latency. By adopting a causal inference based approach, right, the system is able to tell you a sequence of events which caused an outage. Basically, you did a deployment on so-and-so date, which caused the CPU spike to happen on a so-and-so services, which caused the API latency to spike up by so many number of seconds or milliseconds, right? That's what we were moving to, and it is very much needed for us, considering the scale of the platform that we are building. Today at best we are handling 1 crore transactions per day. We are expecting a massive growth in the number of transactions that we will be having, and most of these are real-time transactions where we need to give the customer an immediate response of whether it is successful or failure, right? So observability is going to play a very key role rather than over top of the functionality that we are building.
No, I think that's very interesting, right? So I think one is of proactively kind of identifying what could go wrong, right? And then once something has gone wrong, right, how do you kind of trace back your steps to say what could have saved the day? And as I say, right, so it's like a horror movie, right? So once you've seen the movie, you know it's predictable storyline, right? You could have seen something happening, right, and you could have prevented that. With that, like Ankit, I'll probably move to you, right? So you render content, and probably, I don't know if some of your customers are sitting here, right? But obviously, every website that is running or all requires content that is there, right? So kind of, if you could share any sort of anecdotes or stories in terms of where real-time data that you could leverage to kind of save the day for not just for yourself, but for your end customers as well.
Yeah. So I think from the Contentstack perspective, we are a digital experience platform where most of our customers uses our APIs to render the content. So we can't able to figure it out what user experience that customer going through could be critical from our product perspective, right? For us, every API transaction is matters. So, and also in our product, we do the rollouts every day. So in a year, we do around 2,000 rollouts. It means that downtime should not happen at all. At any rollout that we are doing at the product level, downtime should not happen. So observability platform plays very critical role. Why? Because we have a formula, a success formula. Before our customers inform us there is an error, we should be able to predict that particular error and then start fixing it. So it means that we continuously monitor our incoming traffic, which is coming from CDN level and as well as our internal microservices architecture perspective. Because all this data matters for us to predict whether there is an error that customer is going to see, and we start fixing them during the rollout process. So that's what I think we are doing from ensuring that customers will serve their customers without any downtime, and that their websites are running 99.99% without any prelude.
I think that's amazing. Obviously, when you have so many systems, you're tracking so much data, we generate a lot of logs, right? And I think we were having a conversation about like how your logs cost could actually outgrow your cloud cost today, right? So Suresh, probably I'll come to you with that, right? So with the kind of content that you're generating, with the kind of number of users, which is probably unpredictable, right? So yesterday, the exit poll results came out, right? So everybody wanted to check out. I was on my plane checking what the poll results look like, right? So obviously there's a lot of fluctuation, there's no static demand, right? So how do you kind of make sure that you are able to manage your observability cost, right, without losing the availability or visibility that you want to kind of get out?
As you said, no, the cost of log or retaining and maintaining the log is becoming more expensive than actually infrastructure itself these days, right? So I come from the era where for me the observability platform was 4 or 5 SSH sections on the computer screen, each logged into one server and tail minus F. Logs keep running on the screen, so you know something is wrong, you get it. So what we used to do, right, when lots of entries come in, after tail minus F, we put a pipe to grep. And then say, I only want to see if this contains an error. Otherwise, don't bring it there, correct? Ideally, we should be able to understand what is the signal that we want to capture. Information is there, but from there, what signal, from data, what signal you want to capture. So categorize that signal into what is the business level signal. For us, if the website is down, is a top level signal that nobody can access the website. Or my response times to page load has increased. Page is now taking more time to load. That's the top level signal I want to know. So if you are able to correlate, only take this information and store. Don't store everything that is coming up from the infrastructure, various CIs, right? So the service is what you deliver back to the business, and that service is made up of lots of configuration items, and each item is what is generating your logs. But you consolidate that to understand the service metrics, and then capture those logs that is impacting the service metrics only, and use that to generate your alerts. So that's one way where I call it as prioritize context, and then instead of history, number one. And number two is, if you say, for example, we have multiple configuration items in the infrastructure, but these configuration items are generally not set in single point of failure mode. Right? You are actually setting them as a high available mode. But one node might fail, but that is not actually impacting your service. Okay. So in this case, you still want to understand this node has failed, but the service level impact is still not there. So you want to make sure that you can identify these types of log entries that talks about a CI failure completely, and then capture those things. So that type of filtration is what we need to do to make sure that we don't capture, and logs can be generated, but you need not capture and process and store everything. So that intelligence has to be there. That's what I think today's observability platform brings in compared to my tail minus F that I used to do 20 years back.
No, I think that's very interesting, right? So how do you kind of manage the cost without sort of losing the data and insight that you want to really get out of it, right? And that kind of sort of brings to the next part of the question that probably Mansoor for you, right? So we have like any e-commerce platform like yours, right, where customers could be logged in at any point of time, right? or you could have, you're doing like a Akshaya Tritiya sale or some of these things where things could kind of, the volume could be unpredictable, the traffic could come anywhere, a lot of bot attacks also keep happening, right? Now in such situation, if anything goes wrong, how do you kind of, what are the best practices or the system that you sort of put in place to kind of leverage the data that you're generating to do a faster RCA than what probably would have done a year back, 2 years back, right? So how do you kind of, what are the systems and checks that you're putting in place for a better and faster RCA?
Okay. The contextual alerting and automated insights are the key for a faster RCA, first of all. So at CaratLane, I mean, in our scale, every downtime counts an incident. So we follow 3 best practices, which has drastically reduced our mean time to detect and mean time to recovery. So the first one I can say that unified incident timeline. So we gather all, we are gathering all the metrics, events, user experience, everything to a single visualized dashboard where our people can easily, find out where the issue starts and where it is still occurring, kind of. So it is something like proactive, dashboard which can used for understanding the incident time. And another second one is runbook automation. So we built self-healing and diagnostic script, which will, which is hosted on top of our Observability stack. So when any issue or anomaly detects in the system, the diagnostic script will auto run, and then it will do all the preliminary checks and dependencies, and then it will give you a valuable data immediately to the engineers. It's a best clue, I can say. And third one, it's a tag everything. So we have to tag all our services, events, metrics, and everything we have to tag in a cloud area, I could say. So, the tag gives you a valuable input when you wanted to search in terms of service name, version, owner, environment, kind of. So it gives the immediate result like which one is affected and what happened to the particular service. So these 3, I could say these 3 points we have reached, and for our engineers, on-call engineers, it gives, and also it has reduced our time on what broke, and it has given enough time to fix the issue. So that is how it works for us. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Mansoor. Dr. Arivu, coming to you, right? So with a hybrid environment, right, multi-cloud approach and hybrid environment, right? So and a lot of compliances in place, a lot of regulations in place. How does your team kind of keep a track of all the traces and logs, kind of do a better RCA and come to a conclusion very quickly?
Yeah, thank you, Ankit. It's an interesting question, the current era, which means we are getting the data from various sources. For example, we are getting data from server, we are getting data from applications, we are getting data from APIs, and few of the applications will be hosted on premises, few will be cloud native platforms. So first step would be to get all the data into the same place, which means either it can be a hosted environment or on premises, get everything into a same place. That's the first step. Second, the data, whatever you received from various sources will be in a different format, and then we need to standardize the data, whatever the logs we are received from across all the systems. So after standardizing the logs, the third step would be to do some predictive analytics on top of it. In the area of agentic AI, we are moving from reactive to preventive. Currently, we are at preventive. From preventive, we are moving to prescriptive, which is a proactive measure of validating all applications. With the unified logs and standardizing, normalizing the logs received from various systems which are cloud and other hybrid platforms, we are moving towards proactive. That's the way we are taking into all regulated industries, Ankit. Thank you.
That's very interesting, right? So moving from one regulated industry to another, right? So sure, for you, right? So you are an financial industry powerhouse, right? With thousands of applications, sort of connecting with your systems to kind of run on a day-to-day basis, right? So how do you kind of maintain a meaningful sort of correlation and traces, right?
So from applying the first principle here, right, I think in any logging, in any distributed environment, right, I think the first basic thing that is needed is basically the tracing context. Tracing context, when I say tracing context, what is that trace ID through which I can link multiple different transactions together? And what is the span ID for each microservice or each unit of work which is participating in the environment, right? This gives a very good overview of how to stitch the transactions together across multiple different microservices. And while theory is sound, implementing this across multiple different microservices may be difficult because like each developer in a polyglot environment, they might be using different set of services. They may not be doing the trace ID propagation or the context propagation, right? So that's where we are trying to standardize in terms of how do we ensure that without, depending on the developers, how do we automate it in such a way that the context propagation happens, right? And apart from this trace kinetic propagation, we are also maintaining something called as a business context, or basically business metrics that we are maintaining, right? As part of each transaction, what is the relevant business metrics in terms of what is the customer ID or what is the transaction, what is the type of transaction that we are trying to do? And apart from the correlation ID, right, what are all the other meaningful linking IDs that can be used, right? Because like correlation ID makes sense in case of a real-time transaction. When I put something into a database system and some batch process is going to take it and process, right? It could happen at a different set of timelines. So correlation ID may not make sense here. What other things make sense here in terms of business context, right? Some sort of business context ID is something that we generate and then propagate it across, so that when, as a unit of work, right, we are able to stitch everything together in case something wrong happens, right? So we are maintaining stronger discipline in terms of trace ID propagation, the business context propagation, and also from an infrastructure point of view, right? We are using cloud in multi-region, high availability kind of environment. So we basically propagate the context around what is the execution environment in terms of what is the region around which this transaction is getting processed, what is the node and what is the pod level context that is getting processed, and what is the service level context, right? So these three contexts by default is getting enriched over every single pipeline. We are propagating it across so that when an issue happens, right, and all of this information is good enough for a any decent observability tool to ensure that even correlation happens out of the box, right? It happens out because that is the reason we are moving to an observability platform. And some of the latest observability tools in terms of Dynatrace or Datadog or Splunk, right? They can also do the causal inference, right? They can do the temporal ordering of events to understand what caused which kind of analysis, right? The only thing, bare minimal thing that we need to do is to ensure that all of this data is getting propagated, right? I think once we are able to do that, right, the underlying engine can take care of the heavy lifting of stitching together and then doing an inference, right? I think that's what we are trying.
No, obviously, I think it's sort of a cyclical loop, right? So once you look at data, you kind of figure out what to do, how to kind of improve it, keep making changes, and then I think with the advancement of technology, right, I think a lot of auto-correlation, sort of that's happening, right? So building on that, right, so Santosh, moving to you, right, so how can enterprises leverage all of this data to kind of do better decision making, right? So how to kind of drive better business decision? You talked about looking at the application which are not getting used, but anything else that you could share with us?
Yeah, sure. I think for any organization who are trying to move to the observability platforms and then get signals out of it, my strong recommendation is although the platform, right, itself is meant for engineering, but I think it's best to partner with the business teams, understand what signals that we need to capture at the start of the journey, right? And then that helps us to understand what we need to track, right? What signals that we need to capture. But when we're actually trying to move, we need to first have the strategy, right? The strategy includes what kind of level of logs that we have, how much budget that we have, right? Like, if we don't have those clear directions, we log everything and then we end up paying more, right? As other speakers have mentioned, we've got some of the logs have actually costed us 3-4 times, right? Even 10x times than the application cloud cost, right? That's how things will turn out if we're not really careful. So we have to really give the clear direction to the squads, right, the engineering teams, on what kind of a level of details that we need. The other one is understanding what is that one signal, right? Like one particular unit metric which actually impacts the business, right? And making sure that we have correlation ID across the transaction, throughout the transaction, across all the services around that unit metric, right? That helps us to understand where it is failing, how it is failing, right? I think that's the part that I was talking about, strategy, which includes how things are actually getting done. Once the strategy is clear, during the implementation phase, we obviously push the data, everything will be done fine. But when we are actually pushing the data, this is another observation that I had from my experience. Even though strategy is clear, because engineers keep changing, squads have different priorities. They don't really look at that very seriously. They try to push everything. So you need to have a filter that goes into the platform, right, to remove the data. Either you can do two ways, right? One is log everything, and then filter it out, and then send the data to the platform. That's an ideal situation, but not all the situations that we can achieve it, right? And the second way that we can do is push everything, whatever it is logged, but then remove the data that's once it is there in the platform. That's the second way of doing it if we can't really achieve the first one. The preference is always given to the first one so that you don't have to really remove the data at all, right? So that's the second part, right? The third part is where I think we need to, so based on the signals that we have agreed, based on the unit metric, based on the signals agreed with the business partners, try to see how we can actually build a dashboard, right? Build a dashboard that actually gets the report out of all of these signals that we're actually sending. I've seen from the experience, some of the teams straight away jump to the last one, right? Can we actually go to the auto healing, right? Target the premium step, right? Which is the last step ultimately that we want to try. But I think we have to go step by step, right? Each step is important for us to get it right. And then that's the last leg that will actually help us to seamlessly run the application, right? Without having any issues. Even if there is an issue, if it is related to the performance degradation, auto-scaling happens automatically. Some of these auto-healings can happen. But I think I would suggest that that can be the last stage. Once you figure out all the first 3 stages are done, which is like having a dashboard, clear outcomes, understanding what signals that you are getting, how the usage is there, patterns are understood, right? Once all of that is done, the last part, the fourth part is where I think we can try and make those decisions, right? Actionable insights based on those signals. I think this is probably, from my experience, I think this is what I would recommend if anybody is actually trying to move to the observability. If the organizations are in the observability journey, this is how I would probably suggest approaching this, because it helps us to have a right strategy, right approach, and then right cost management, which is really important, right, in this, specifically in the current tools that are available in the market.
This is very interesting, right? I think while we talk about logs and the kind of data that is getting generated, obviously on one side it impacts the cost aspect, right? But also it creates so much data that it becomes very difficult to kind of filter out noise and actual problem that might have been there. I think you talked about how you would kind of create those sort of code to kind of the tail minus F to kind of, and then put error in that to do that, right? But given the kind of data that we're generating today, right, and alert fatigue, and looking at the number of dashboards, alert fatigue is very, very real, right? So Suresh, probably I'll bring you in onto this conversation. Question is that, like what kind of automations, in case you've put in, right, to kind of identify the right signals that are there, or if there have been any instances where just because of the alert fatigue, the team might have missed out a critical alert that came out and kind of had an impact, right?
Yeah, obviously this, I mean, now the IT world is more complex than the dev and ops, right? It's even in a household, one provides and the other run and maintain. So in all our enterprise and organizations, we have developers who provide and the engineers who maintain it. And what happens is, like there are misalignments in the family. We do have misalignments, that's unavoidable. But how do you manage it? In IT, it can be family, it cannot be solved, it's eternal. So, but in IT, I'm sure it can be solved with the right tools and processes put in place. So, I think we should stick to certain fundamentals. So you're talking about alert fatigues, right? Again, I think it's due to misalignment, lack of having the same source as truth between these parties involved. I'm just calling out 2 parties here, the dev and ops. However, in real world, IT has become so complex that it is much more than that in reality as we speak today. Arivu was calling out about agentic AI generation we are in. So there are code generated by agents, swarm of agents running Our friend Elon Musk is now calling macro hard, which is going to be a complete AI company and so on. So it's actually more complex and mad than a dev and ops trying to deliver an application or a business outcome, right? So obviously it's more complicated than just a mere error fatigue. I think the vision and culture in an organization, the DNA has to change. Of course, there are tools. There are thought leaders who are creating solution for this in the market. Is this adopted? That has to be put right with fundamentals in place. At our organization, Access Healthcare, we deal with the healthcare RCM, and it's very critical in healthcare. You know, instead of going into that detail, I would call out what are the three fundamentals. I believe sincerely that we must have a cohesive data layer, the source of truth, which I think, I strongly believe systems like Datadog, Dynatrace, and few other best in the market are actually doing a great job. But adopting it, putting the right configuration in place, using it against the value of the business is what is missing. The translation of metrics, measures, and KPIs into business value, that is the gap, major gap. So we get very inquisitive and curious. The IT folks, engineers get very inquisitive and curious. They configure alerts left, right, center. They allow AI bots to configure left, right, center. End of the day, there is flood of, you know, like we watch advertisements in between movies. I mean, we really miss, you know, we really miss the actual pointers that really delivers or affects the business value. So the second thing after cohesive data layer, much more important is collaborative response. If my dev is going to say something and my engineering team is going to say something else to the management or the board, I think they are going to be confused. They wouldn't know what is actually moving the needle towards where I want to be. So that's the second most important thing. And with midst of all this, I think we are missing one very key aspect in the culture of the organization, which is continuous learning. Be it ML or be it a bot or be it human, it's very important the continuous learning is part of the DNA. It's not just about trying to be first in the, the fear of missing out, bringing all the latest tools and processes onto the table is not going to solve the problem unless if the machine learning model has a reinforcement learning part of it, it's going to be alive. Likewise, the humans, unless we have a culture of continuous learning, I think we are going to lose. Definitely, the people will not, the team will not understand what to use to benefit what and to fit what purpose, right? So, alert fatigue is a problem. It's a point problem. But at large, I believe that putting these fundamentals, the 3 C's, cohesive data layer and collaborative response and continuous learning, to make sure the team across the organization is able to see the same truth, speak the same language, and ultimately celebrate the win together. That's very important. That's my take on this.
Absolutely right on that, right? And with that, I think there's obviously a big difference between how typical larger organizations work, I think, which is more methodical, more kind of process-oriented. Bhuvanesh, you've been with a startup, right, where I think features are created and dumped very, very quickly, right? The code writing or product releases are much faster typically than general larger organizations, traditional organizations, right? Because the speed at which you need to operate and create that awareness in the market is very different, right? And we talked about the culture aspect, right? So I touched upon the culture aspect, but you are kind of working in a very different sort of problem statement, right? So how do you kind of bring in that kind of awareness without overwhelming, right? So how do you kind of create that balance in your team that you need to ship out features, we need to ship out code, we need to kind of make new products, all of that, but making sure that things are still in check because when a customer comes, they need to have the right experience, right? So how to kind of get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, talking about alert fatigue, right? While Mohamed was talking here, he actually got a robocall about an alert that he I don't know if it was alert fatigue or a real alert that he has to run somewhere to fix something, right? So how do we solve the problem of alert fatigue in this era of agentic AI where code, I don't know, we are spinning up applications, large applications by providing very large prompts instantly, right? It takes about, 15, 20 minutes to generate a large application and see it in action, right? If that's the amount of code that is being written so fast, how do you actually make sense of all the alerts that you create along with it? So it is going to be with the policies that you define as leaders, right? Because the more alerts you put in, obviously it is going to create a fatigue for you. You don't know whether it is a real alert or something that can be managed without your intervention, right? So I would say, I don't know if you'll call it over-engineering, but I think in this age, your policies have to be automated, saying if you're not following your rules or the policies that you set up, the alert is probably not useful, right? You're not going to be creating an actionable insight out of the alert that came in. So that is my point of view.
I think obviously the culture starts at the top, right? So what you define and how you kind of take it down, I think that shapes a long way for the new engineers, the new developers who come through, right? So with that, I'll probably move back to the audience, right? So one question, I think we talked about alerts and fatigues and dashboards and all of that, right? So I want to see a poll of hands, right? If you have been in a war room when the incidents happen, which last longer than a typical movie, right? So you've been hours and hours trying to figure out something, right? So would like to kind of see a raise of hands for that. Awesome. So obviously, when you have an incident, when there's a war room, when there are multiple stakeholders who have come together, Suresh touched upon, right, about how different parties need to come together with that. Mahesh would kind of sort of love to kind of get your thoughts on how you kind of see that what's the most effective way for developers and SREs to kind of get aligned to resolve the issues that have come in.
I have my dev lead and the SRE sitting in the audience. And though they are like family, I know they don't look at their face each other most of the time. So, I mean, this is what is happening in real. Let's admit, I mean, you are not imposing that there is misalignment between these two, but it's real. And it's their role. And, one look at the code and the one look at the environment. There is a kind of a analogy I want to use. It's called the juice machine problem, right? So a machine is designed to deliver apple juice, orange, and mixed fruit juice. So customer had an issue. Customer is saying, whenever I press the button for apple juice, I get it immediately, or orange juice, I get it immediately. Mixed fruit, the system is freezing. But again, I go for apple juice, again it's freezing. So it doesn't work for the customer. The end result is they don't get, it's very intermittent, very familiar, right? The code works at time, it doesn't work. And of course, let's look at the developer and SRE situation here. The developer came, he started looking at the juice and he said, no, all three juices are perfect. I put the right ingredients, I mean, it's filtered out, it cannot clog that, I mean, and all that. And the engineer said, the machine is fine, it's deployed properly. I mean, nobody looked at the design, nobody looked at the things together, because actually the fault is whenever the mixed juice is pressed, there is a design that it cleans the pipe, because it don't want to have the flavor of apple and orange. It want to kind of clean after the mixed juice is fleshed out. It's design. It's actually working per design, but both didn't just talk together, and they don't look at the design together. They don't look at the problem together. Coming back to what I said earlier, I think the fundamentals here is we have to. they don't want to have problem. They want to work together. The only way to make a difference here is we have to make this two teams. Rather, today it's not just two teams. Like most of us are saying, it's a lot of agents working together. It's just not people, right? We have to make all this to look at the same fact for reference of problem and the design, and so that this can work as a team towards the solution instead of trying to spending more time. The war room takes hours only because I'm sure all of us would have experienced many hours would have gone to find what is the problem. What's the data behind the problem? Person X or a developer will bring code details and statistics, and another person will bring another angle to it, while the business is actually not happy with any of this. That's the reality, right? So fundamentals, once again, using tools are very important. So we must have one perfect observability deployed at the right place from the design aspect, from the design of the platform itself, so that the people can see the same truth, speak the same language, and really work on solving the problem rather than spending more time in finding what's the right data, which alert to look at it and all that. So dev and SREs are not enemies. My people are really contributing a lot to the success of the organization. So how we implement observability and make it work, that makes the difference.
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? So how do you kind of see, everybody is there to make the organization successful, right? So the conflict might be the way that we are trying to solve that problem, but not really the end objective, right? So with that, like Anki, I'd like to kind of hear your thoughts on how you have been able to bring in that culture so that dev and SREs are speaking the same language, right? And then kind of making sure that the war room time comes down significantly, and then everybody's back to work, right? So,
yeah, I can bring one perspective. See the surprises earlier itself. A lot of times, what we end up with, developers are in the center stage in the development and as well as rollout. But what fundamentally missing is we should know that what kind of surprises that we could see when we host the product into the any of the cloud environments, right? Because most of the times we will have a overconfidence. We end up with saying that I think everything will work as expected. But you should know that where there could be a possibility of failure. If you can able to understand the possibility of the failure, you are prepared. How do you address that particular problem? Majority of the cases, I think the culture is in the company. It is there in the past as well. Whenever developers are confident enough in developing the product and it goes to the hands of testers, the system will break, right? It is not like a new era, but what I could able to say was, you have a game day, try to break the system before it goes to the production, and ensure that I think you have documented where the system can go wrong, and ensure that you are working together with the relevant parties with a common goal, right? Not to have like a blame, right? This is not because of me, this is because of some other team. So at the end, what we need to do was we need to have a very, very fast decision making. Whenever there is an incident happened into the cloud environment, we need to fast enough whether we need to take the rollback or we can fix as fast as enough. So I can say common understanding and pre-preparation along with the relevant parties help to overcome this particular thing.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Mansoor, like obviously war rooms can get very, very heated, right? So how do you kind of bring in calm and sort of bring everybody back to the focus together, and then any pointers for the audience to kind of implement in their sort of culture, in their tech stack, to kind of make sure that we are working towards a sort of common decision making and common goal than rather than sort of having a heated environment.
Okay. So, so if there is no alerts, there is no load, then I feel that there is no business happening, first of all. So if it is there, yes, the business is running something there. And as a head of CaratLane for tech operations, I'm managing this global IT, DevOps, SRE, application support. So first thing is I should not panic for any, fatigue alerts. So for that, I should be having a valuable inputs from the system. I could compare my system with the God, okay. So the system will scale. The system system cannot speak to me, but I can speak to system. So what I am writing in the system, it will just follow that. So in this, in this section that, as Bhuvanesh mentioned that, I supposed to get a alert call, the call alert when something goes wrong in the website or mobile apps or in the business applications or in the ERP, whatever. But I don't care about it. What I want is a valuable input from the system, why the call was happened. So according to, along with that, I should be receiving some SMS. The SMS has to say that, okay, what all was working fine, what alone is impacted. So from there, I should ensure that, okay, this is what happened, whether it is a business impact immediately or not, that should be the first question for me. So I have to report on it. This is the one thing. And second thing is like the running of perfect website and mobile apps, it's something like heartbeat for me also. So if it is going down, I'll also go down. So that is so important. We should keep all this in place before we create some structure into the system. So I'll just tell about the exact, real-time issues we faced at CaratLane. So we were, facing a incident where our checkout API was suddenly spiked. Response time was spiked, and all the customers were unable to place their orders. So as usual, naturally, engineering team and the business team and tech team come to the blaming game in that. So here, what we did was like the calm of chaos. Okay, so it's a structured incident response. So what we did was like we created a role. The first role is a commander. A second role is a communicator. A third role is a resolver. So we sat in a single place where we visualized which service degraded and enlightening the exact traces, and then we found that a particular cache invalidation was timing out. That's the main reason for that. So, and then within a few minutes, we routed our traffic to a failover system. And top of that, we conducted no blaming postmortem. So means that, it is not about just we are fixing the code which has caused the issue. It is about the process allowed it, no? Some process allowed that error, no? That process has to be fixed at the same time. That is very, very important. So that is how we follow. And my advice for the, for the SREs and DevOps would be like, before incidents happening, you just do some chaos and then face it. Then only you can have a confidence to handle the issues on the time of issue occurring. So our engineers don't prepare on the exact time. They just fall into the preparation for the issues at the time of incidents. So the mock incident drills and better communication protocols, and also psychological safety discussions with the engineers. Those all would help definitely to ensure that your business and your infra are up and running. Thank you.
I think very interesting, right? So if you sort of sweat it out during mock drills and then kind of be prepared for it so that when the things happen, you know exactly what to do, right? And then obviously, I think all senior leaders, so this room is full of like people who are really sort of concerned about observability, live and breathe it every single day, right? And when things go wrong, obviously the business outcomes get impacted, but when things are all stable, going fine, it does not come into regular conversations in the boardrooms, right? So how do kind of, I think the next topic that I want to kind of touch upon is how do we bring that into business decision making, investment conversations, metrics that drive business, right? So probably Dr. Arivu, I would love to kind of get your thoughts on how have you kind of been able to leverage the observability data to kind of shape a strategic decision in the organization?
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting question. In the recent incident, I would like to quote what has happened. The problem statement given was the senior members who are joining newly in the organization, their expense payment is getting delayed, which means the people who are joining into the organization, this is a problem statement. We started digging into entire loop backwards. First is the data should travel from HR database to the expense management database, and also the cost center should be linked to the respective individual, all the department linking, and sub-cost center, everything. All those linkages happen through various modes. In some form, it's from a flat file, some it's from API, some it's from application A to application B. So we started putting in monitoring for all these kind of data transfer from place A to place B. To track the complete monitoring, it's become a very big project within the organization. We would see that 7 layers, which means 6 intermittent observation points we need to put it. Each and every point is having diversified monitoring, some from API, some from application directly, some into flat file. We made a very big project within the organization. After completing the project, now we are able to understand some failure points within each and every node. And that means the data which is not completely loaded into from point A to point B, from point B to C, the data already started loading, which means we have a gap in between. Then we have created a reactive agent which completely monitors this entire 6 failure points, whatever we identified. Once the node identifies the failure point, under layer we created some Python scripts also to fix the failure point, the frequently occurring failure point. The reactive node agent will call the Python script and then autonomously run the Python script which can fix the failure point. So after implementing this for the last 3.5 months, we are not facing any failure of these things and then having all timely payments. Now you will be having a question, what if our scenario is not covered using this reactive agent? So we created one more proactive agent. What all things which are not been covered into the reactive monitoring, we fed into this proactive agent. So currently we deployed the proactive agent solution also into production. With these two reactive and proactive solutions, we are able to address this problem 100%. This thing we started as a small incident overnight and then it became a very huge project. It took 3.5 months to analyze and then come up with a solution. Now with this solution, we are able to completely arrest the problem with timely payment to all the new joining member. It's an interesting question. Thank you, Ankit.
Thanks for sharing that, right? So, Suresh, for you, I want to kind of check, right? So we talk about latency, we talk about MTTR, right? So, how does that translate into boardroom metrics? So,
yeah. Talking about boardroom, I think in last 3 decades, I've seen IT, the whole purpose of IT is to generate information from data and making insights. So taking the report from report to dashboards, dashboards becoming decision boards, influencing the meetings and decision makers, the CXOs and the investors sometimes. I think we evolved and we learned that IT is not just about keeping the data in a disk and formatting it in a nice printout and all that those days 2 decades ago, to where we are creating more value out of it to the decision makers. Meanings from that directly links to the business value. That's what is happening a lot nowadays. However, when I say this, I think at some point this became a ritual. I'm now calling it out a problem from this, right? The ritual is people are now very well aware of the tools that can create analytics out of data, insight out of data, generate insight with the latest Gen AI out of data without us writing program. And at some point, we actually lost connecting the, bringing the meaning out that makes sense to the decision makers. Rather, we are kind of creating overload of, the decisions and KPIs and whether it really adds, is it pointing to the pointer that the decision makers want to see? I think that's getting lost somewhere. That's what I'm observing. For an example, in my organization, we have observability dashboards. We have a lot of monitoring systems, homegrown and, we have commercially off-the-shelf solution that monitors our cloud platforms, user behaviors, business process. We have lots of dashboards, to be very frank, IT related, business related. But when it goes up to the stakeholder, actual stakeholder, what it matters is any of this to our customer in the healthcare RCM world, we are trying our best to make sure our customers are spending less cost to collect the payments. That's the ultimate objective. Whether the measures and metrics are rolling up ultimately to a particular customer's dial showing that we started with 3%, now it is 2.5 or is it 3.5? And what is driving it? What downtime of how IT is having an impact positively or negatively to that? Making my application on cloud and increasing the ability to onboard more end customer, is it increasing the dial towards where I want or not? I mean, these perspective are missed. Rather, the engineers and the leads, they are looking at very many levels beneath that. They are really worried about the right things at the bottom, because the bottom up is not rolling up to the needles that we want to look at the right parameters. So definitely, I think a literacy from what is the value to the organization, a top-down has to go down for the bottom-up to provide the right measure, metrics, rolling up to the KPI. That means to the strategic governance and board, end of the day. I think that's the take on it. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. I would love to kind of keep having this conversation, right? There's so much meaningful insights coming out of this, right? But I'm aware of the time, right? So do you have time for audience questions? Okay. Probably we can take a couple of questions from the audience.
Yes, if the audience has any questions, we can take 2 or 3 questions from the audience. So you can raise your hands and we will pass on a mic to your place. So are there any questions on the panel to any of our panelists? You can also meet them on the outside during the breaks. But yes, we have an open floor for questions. In case we do have any questions, please do raise your hands. Yes, can we have a mic passed on in the front, please? In the front, yes. First table, first table.
Hello, my name is Narayanan. The question is towards Mr. Sivashankar. He explained about event correlation, right? I think this takes a lot because when we start creating alerts across different layers, starting with lower infrastructure layer, across your service layer, application layer, and then business layers, the moment there's a spike in infrastructure, it means there are alerts all over the layers, right? How to correlate this is a big challenge that most of the organization face. What are the suggestions that you have around that?
The fundamental stuff is about basically giving a correlation ID. I think there is a very basic thing that enables the system underneath system, right? There is going to be an observability engine which has to given some sort of an intelligence to say, using some sort of a key, you can group some of these related events, right? That starts right from the deployment basically. Say for example, if you're using an Argo CD as a deployment stuff, right? You will be using some sort of an identifier to mark this as a deployment, right? But that may not correlate with the correlation ID which you are generating as part of the transaction, right? What are the business constructs around which you are doing the deployment, right? So anything other than correlation ID is something that has to go as part of the deployment. We have our own set of domain keys that form these things, right? And then we pass it to the engine. And then even from an event correlation perspective, right? I think there are 2 aspects basically, right? There is the first concept is event correlation. The second one is the causal inference. Event correlation will just give an overview of what could be the issue. It may not be deterministic, it is probabilistic, right? It is up to the intelligence of the SR engineer to go and see whether this really maps to the issue or not, right? The benefit of using a causal inference is basically once the model is mature, I think it depends on the domain model that we are using. It basically will very clearly say, this particular issue is the responsible, it's like a butterfly effect, right? You did something on so day, and that is causing this issue, right? That is the outcome of a causal inference, right? From an event correlation perspective, right, you use any native observability platforms, right? Whether it is Neuralink or Splunk or thing, right? As long as there is a correlation identifier, right? There is a correlation identifier, it is able to group these events, related events across multiple different microservices, across multiple different infrastructures and multiple different databases using this correlation identifier, right? And if there is no such correlation identifier, right, it uses its own fuzzy logic algorithm, right? Basis any other matching keys. Using any other matching keys is something that it tries to correlate, or basically a timestamp based matching. A temporal basing timestamp as a temporal identifier, and then see if it can, this group of events are related. That's where it is probabilistic, not deterministic. But the moment you go into the causal inference, right, it has a very, the engine forms a directed acyclic graph of various events that are happening in the system, right? And this probably, again, it's basically the underneath is going to be an AI model which is going to create these stuffs, and it has a lot of room for improvement, right? More very specific to the domain keys that we are populating, and that's going to be a journey. But event correlation is something most platforms, most engines do it out of the box. The moment you have the very basic discipline of doing the context propagation right from a gateway layer until the database layer, if you're able to propagate a correlation ID, event correlation works beautifully.
Got it, thank you.